In a small, bustling town, a young man named Ethan felt a strange emptiness despite his successful life. He often wondered, is there more to life than just living for the day? One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a chance encounter with an old book on fasting sparked a journey he could never have imagined. Ethan's curiosity deepened as he read about ancient practices connecting people with the divine, and a quiet determination grew in him to understand this mystery. As Ethan explored the concept of fasting, he learned about its biblical roots, such as the Day of Atonement, when people fasted to seek forgiveness and reflect on their sins. The more he read, the more he realized that fasting wasn't merely about abstaining from food, it was about creating a sacred space within the soul to connect with God. He decided to try it himself, not knowing what challenges lay ahead. Enjoying the story? Like, subscribe, and share to support us. Let's continue. Ethan's first fast was daunting. As his hunger grew, so did his doubts. Could he endure this? Was there even a point? He remembered the words of Jesus, "When you fast, do not look somber like the hypocrites." Encouraged by this, Ethan resolved to push through. His inner battle with hunger began to reveal his deeper struggles with pride and materialism. During his fast, Ethan began to notice subtle changes. Time seemed to slow, and his prayers felt more meaningful. He wrote in his journal, "This is more than hunger. This is clarity. It's as if I'm peeling away the layers of noise in my life." He felt a new awareness of his dependence on God for strength. Ethan's 2-day fast proved more challenging than expected. By the second day, hunger consumed his thoughts, and he felt physically weak. But as he prayed, an unexpected peace washed over him. It wasn't clarity for his career that came, but a deeper trust in God. Ethan realized the fast wasn't about answers, it was about surrender. When he broke the fast, his gratitude for even a simple meal deepened. Encouraged by his journey, Ethan invited Claire, a close friend, to fast with him for a shared cause. Hesitant at first, she agreed, and they dedicated a day to praying for a mutual friend in need. Throughout the fast, they supported each other, sharing scripture and encouragement. By evening, Claire felt a newfound sense of reliance on God, and their bond strengthened through the shared experience. Inspired by his success, Ethan proposed a church-wide day of fasting and prayer. Though some were hesitant, he reassured them that even a small fast could make a difference. On the chosen day, groups prayed together throughout the church, lifting up their community. By evening, testimonies of spiritual breakthroughs poured in, and Ethan realized the power of collective fasting in strengthening faith and unity. During another fast, Ethan struggled with distractions and discouragement. Turning to Isaiah 58, he realized fasting wasn't just about personal transformation, but also about serving others. Inspired, he spent the day volunteering at a shelter, discovering the joy of pairing fasting with compassion. This added a deeper meaning to his practice, reminding him of God's call to love others. As Ethan's fasting practice matured, he decided to try a partial fast modeled after Daniel's example. For 10 days, he abstained from rich foods, consuming only simple meals of vegetables and water. At first, it felt easy, but as the days went on, he began to miss the indulgent foods he had once taken for granted. This fast, however, opened his eyes to how much he relied on material comforts for joy. By the end of the 10 days, he not only felt physically refreshed, but also spiritually renewed. He journaled, "This fast has reminded me that true joy doesn't come from what I consume, but from being in God's presence." The simplicity of the meals became a metaphor for the simplicity he sought in his relationship with God, free from distractions and pretense. Ethan decided to incorporate this partial fast into his life regularly, finding that it helped him stay focused on what truly mattered. Ethan began to notice that fasting was strengthening other areas of his life. He felt more disciplined and patient, even in situations that previously would have frustrated him. One day at work, a stressful project threatened to derail his focus, but instead of reacting in anger, Ethan paused, took a deep breath, and prayed silently. Later, He realized that fasting had taught him how to rely on God's strength rather than his own. This change didn't go unnoticed by his colleagues, who commented on his newfound calmness. Ethan took the opportunity to share how fasting had helped him grow spiritually and emotionally. His openness sparked curiosity among his coworkers, and some even expressed interest in learning more about the practice. Ethan realized that his journey was not just for his benefit, but also a way to inspire others to seek God in their own lives. After several months of fasting and growing in faith, Ethan felt a new challenge stirring in his heart. He wanted to attempt a 3-day absolute fast, no food, no water. This type of fast, he knew, was not to be undertaken lightly. He spent days in prayer, seeking God's guidance and preparing his mind and body. On the first day, the physical strain was immediate. Without water, his energy waned quickly, and he battled intense thirst. But through constant prayer, he found strength. By the second day, he felt moments of deep spiritual clarity, as though the veil between him and God had thinned. On the final day, despite his physical weakness, Ethan experienced an overwhelming sense of God's presence. As he ended the fast, he reflected, "Fasting pushes you to your limits, but it's in those moments of surrender that God's power becomes most evident." After his absolute fast, Ethan spent weeks reflecting on what he had learned. He journaled his experiences, documenting the moments when God felt especially near. During this time, he was struck by the idea that fasting was not just about personal breakthroughs, but also about aligning oneself with God's greater plans. Inspired, Ethan decided to study fasting in other religious and cultural contexts, discovering how people throughout history had used fasting to express humility and seek guidance. This broader understanding deepened his respect for the practice, showing him how it transcended individual needs and connected communities to something divine. Ethan began to feel a growing conviction to teach others about fasting. During a church discussion group, he shared his testimony, explaining how fasting had transformed his life. His authenticity moved others, and several members expressed a desire to learn more. Over the next month, Ethan organized a small workshop, guiding participants through the basics of fasting, addressing their fears, and helping them set realistic goals. He emphasized that fasting was not about achieving a certain level of piety, but about sincerity and faith. By the end of the workshop, several members committed to trying their first fast. Seeing others take their first steps toward deeper faith filled Ethan with joy and purpose. One participant from Ethan's workshop, an older woman named Margaret, approached him after the session. She shared her struggle with a wayward son and expressed a desire to fast and pray for his return to faith. Touched by her vulnerability, Ethan offered to fast alongside her. Over the next week, they prayed together daily, lifting up Margaret's son in faith. By the end of the fast, Margaret felt a renewed sense of hope and peace, even though her son had not yet returned. Ethan reminded her that fasting wasn't about immediate results, but about trusting God's timing. As fasting became a regular part of Ethan's life, he noticed how it reshaped his habits and priorities. He began waking up earlier to spend time in prayer, cutting back on distractions like social media, and focusing more on building relationships. He also found himself growing more attuned to the needs of others. During one fast, Ethan felt led to visit a friend he hadn't spoken to in years. The visit rekindled their friendship and opened the door for meaningful spiritual conversations. Ethan realized that fasting was helping him become more aware of God's gentle nudges in his daily life. One day, Ethan decided to try a communal fast with a small group of friends. They agreed to fast together for 3 days, each focusing on a specific prayer need. The experience was transformative for all involved. They shared their struggles, supported each other through moments of weakness, and celebrated small breakthroughs. On the final day, the group gathered for prayer and worship, feeling a profound sense of unity and spiritual connection. Ethan reflected, "There's something powerful about seeking God together. It reminds me that we're not meant to walk this journey alone." Ethan's fasting journey was not without setbacks. During one fast, He felt overwhelmed by work responsibilities and broke his commitment early. The guilt was crushing, and he questioned whether he was truly capable of maintaining such discipline. But through prayer, he realized that failure was part of the process. God wasn't asking for perfection. He was asking for a willing heart. Ethan used the experience to recommit himself, understanding that every fast, successful or not, was an opportunity to grow in faith. Feeling inspired to deepen his fasting practice, Ethan studied the teachings of John Wesley, who fasted regularly to prepare for his ministry. Ethan decided to adopt a similar rhythm, fasting twice a week and dedicating those days to prayer for his church and community. Over time, he noticed how this regular discipline sharpened his focus and gave him a greater sense of purpose. His friends and family began to notice the change in him, describing him as more grounded, patient, and joyful. Ethan credited these changes to the work God was doing through fasting. As Ethan's fasting practice matured, he began to pair it with deep reflection on his life's direction. One particular fast stretched over 5 days, during which he prayed for clarity about a major career decision. He wrestled with doubts, feeling torn between a secure but uninspiring job and the possibility of pursuing ministry full-time. By the 3rd day, exhaustion set in, and Ethan wondered if he had made a mistake in attempting such a long fast. But as he prayed on the evening of the 4th day, he felt a profound sense of peace. A scripture came to his heart. "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding." Proverbs 3:5. On the final day, he knew what he had to do. Though the path of ministry was uncertain, Ethan felt assured that God was calling him to take the leap of faith. With his decision made, Ethan began planning his transition into ministry. He continued fasting to seek God's guidance and provision. As word of his decision spread, friends and colleagues expressed mixed reactions. Some admired his faith, while others questioned his practicality. These doubts weighed on him, but Ethan used each fast to lay his fears before God. During one particularly difficult fast, he found strength in the story of Peter stepping out of the boat onto the water. "Faith means stepping into the unknown," he wrote in his journal, "even when the waves are high." As Ethan moved forward, he decided to deepen his understanding of fasting by studying the experiences of spiritual leaders throughout history. He was particularly inspired by the stories of individuals like Moses, who fasted for 40 days before receiving the 10 Commandments, and Elijah, who fasted while journeying to Mount Horeb. Ethan realized that fasting was not just about self-discipline, but about preparing the soul to receive divine revelations. Motivated, he committed to spending longer periods in prayer and meditation during his fasts, opening himself to whatever God wanted to reveal. Ethan's journey began to impact his community in unexpected ways. As more people witnessed his transformation, they became curious about fasting and its benefits. Ethan organized a monthly fasting group at his church, where people could share their experiences and support each other. These gatherings became a source of encouragement and spiritual growth for many. One woman shared how fasting had helped her overcome bitterness, while a young man credited the practice with giving him courage to reconcile with his estranged father. Ethan marveled at how God was using fasting to heal and unite hearts. One day, Ethan met a man named Thomas, a skeptic who had no interest in faith or fasting. Thomas was going through a personal crisis and attended a fasting group out of desperation. Ethan struck up a conversation with him, sharing his own struggles and how fasting had helped him find peace. Over time, Thomas opened up, agreeing to try a partial fast. The experience left him unexpectedly moved, and he admitted to feeling a strange calm for the first time in years. This moment marked the beginning of Thomas's journey back to faith, and Ethan felt humbled to witness it. Ethan began to realize that fasting had not only transformed his relationship with God, but also taught him valuable lessons about perseverance, humility, and gratitude. One evening, after completing a fast, he reflected on how far he had come. He remembered his initial struggles and how tempted he had been to quit. Now, fasting felt like a natural extension of his faith, a rhythm that aligned his soul with God's will. He wrote in his journal, Fasting has become less about giving up and more about receiving peace, guidance, and a deeper understanding of who God is. Feeling called to go deeper, Ethan decided to attempt a 21-day partial fast. He dedicated the fast to praying for his church's future as they faced decisions about expansion and outreach. Each day brought new challenges, but it also drew Ethan closer to God. As the fast progressed, he began to see how God was orchestrating events, opening doors, and softening hearts within the church. By the end of the fast, the church leadership announced a decision to move forward with their outreach plans, crediting the prayers and fasting of the congregation for their clarity and unity. Ethan's experiences inspired him to write a book about fasting, blending biblical teachings with practical advice and personal testimonies. As he wrote, he reflected on the lessons he had learned, the importance of starting small, the power of collective fasting, and the way fasting revealed hidden dependencies and idols. His hope was that the book would encourage others to explore fasting as a means of deepening their faith. When the book was finally published, it sparked conversations in churches and small groups, spreading the message of fasting far beyond his community. With his book gaining attention, Ethan began receiving invitations to speak at conferences and workshops. Though he felt unqualified, he accepted, trusting that God would use his story to inspire others. At one conference, a woman approached him afterward, tears streaming down her face. She shared how fasting had helped her overcome a deep sense of hopelessness and rediscover her faith. Ethan realized that the impact of fasting was far greater than he had ever imagined. It was a tool for transformation, not just for individuals, but for entire communities. Ethan's journey culminated in a profound realization. Fasting was not just a discipline, but a way of life. It had taught him to live with open hands, trusting God to provide and guide. He began to see fasting as a gift and opportunity to strip away distractions and align his heart with God's purposes. Whether fasting for one meal or 40 days, Ethan approached each fast with humility, knowing that it was less about the act itself and more about the posture of his heart. Looking back, Ethan marveled at how much fasting had transformed him over the years. It had shaped his character, deepened his faith, and strengthened his relationships. He reflected on the many people whose lives had been touched by fasting, from his small church group to the readers of his book. Though the journey had been challenging, Ethan knew it was one of the most rewarding paths he had ever walked. He prayed, "Lord, thank you for teaching me to depend on you and for using this journey to glorify your name." Ethan's story continued as he embraced fasting as a lifelong practice. He knew there would always be challenges, but he also knew the rewards of drawing closer to God through each act of surrender. He encouraged others to take their own first steps, reminding them that fasting was not about achieving perfection, but about seeking God with a sincere heart. As he walked forward in faith, Ethan felt a quiet assurance that the best was yet to come.